shot at minimum wage.
Or to leave Washington Journal, you can find it online at cspan.org. Back now to the floor of the House Live.
Florida, Mr. Radel, the whole number of the House is 432. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, proceedings will resume on the motions to suspend the rules previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order. H.R. 2166 by the yeas and nays. H.R. 3008 by the yeas and nays. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Remaining electronic votes will be conducted as a 5-minute vote. The unfinished business is on the vote on the motion of the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Loomis, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2166 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2166, a bill to direct the Secretary of the Interior and Secretary of Agriculture to expedite access to certain federal lands under the administrative jurisdiction of each Secretary for Good Samaritan search and recovery missions and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amendment? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
And the House voting on two bills at this session here. This is the Good Samaritan Search and Recovery Act, H.R. 2166, and it deals with the Secretary of Interior and Agriculture being in charge of a process to give access to federal lands for search and recovery missions, and also to develop partnerships for search and rescue groups. While we're in this 15-minute break, we're going to take a look at some of the work ahead in the House this week. We talked earlier with a Capitol Hill reporter. House is joining us with a look at the week ahead in Congress. He's the congressional leadership correspondent for National Journal. And Billy, today some of the news included Florida Republican Congressman Trey Radel announcing his resignation. What's been the reaction from House leaders, and what's the process to replace him?
Well, right now, the reaction has been kind of quiet as House leaders and members here are only trickling in for the week. But in Florida, the governor there will have to set a special election and election time for those who want to run for the seat. There's already 2 or 3 hopefuls, including perhaps former member Connie Mack. So things are moving pretty swiftly. This wasn't unexpected, but it was abrupt in terms of right before the State of the Union. I guess we get that sort of bad news out of the way in front of a bigger news story.
And tomorrow you mentioned President Obama's State of the Union address before the joint session of Congress. And you recently wrote about a memo that Republican leaders in the House sent to their members about the federal health care law. What are some of the details about that memo, and what are its implications ahead of the State of the Union speech?
Well, it was an interesting memo sent out today by the Majority Whip Kevin McCarthy of California, clearly intended to remind and underscore that the House Republicans have in the last session and in the first year of this session focused on dismantling or undoing parts or all of the Affordable Care Act. It included statistics on how many bills they've actually voted on and how many parts of the act have been delayed or defunded. The upshot is that his memo states that Democrats have started voting for some of these things, and what may do so as this midterm election year continues. They believe the pressure is building on Democrats to go along with Republicans on more of these votes. So clearly, this process will continue for House Republicans, making the Affordable Care Act a key midterm election year issue.
And also tomorrow, the House expected to begin debate on a bill to ban federal funding of abortion. What details can you share with us on that, and how much support does that measure have from House Democrats?
Well, it has literally no support from House Democrats. There might be a handful. Essentially, it's a bill designed to create, if nothing else, the perception that these health care exchanges and the Affordable Care Act and those sort of things could give people fees or other charges that would go ultimately to abortions. Whether or not this is all true or not, this bill is written to make sure that doesn't happen. It also does everything like would make permanent a ban on D.C. using any federal funding for its abortion program. It's more of a messaging bill, but it's again one that has irritated Democrats in a year where they think other bigger issues, immigration, tax reform, should be underway.
And one of those other issues is the Farm Bill. We could see that on the floor this week. What's the status of the Farm Bill?
Well, that's something that's breaking right now. It appears, from what we're told just a couple minutes ago, that some conference report will land in the House Rules Committee sometime after 6:30 tonight, Monday night. The hope is, at least from their view, is that it'll get bipartisan support and rules. Floor procedures will be set, and that this could be voted on in the House by Wednesday morning. That's a key deadline in terms of getting anything done this week because, of course, House Republicans are going to break for their annual issues strategy retreat out in Maryland's Eastern Shore Wednesday afternoon. They begin their first sessions out there. So it'd have to be a vote Wednesday morning at the latest.
And you mentioned the retreat. What are some of the key issues you think they'll be grappling with out at the retreat?
Well, they'll have to figure out what they want to do about the debt limit, and there's a lot of talk that some Republicans still want to make that a big issue and hold out for some concessions, whatever they might be. That's one thing that'll be talked about. The bigger issue, though, may be the announcement last month, or earlier this month, by Speaker Boehner that he intends to announce some immigration reform principles. Whether that goes beyond some of the rhetoric that Republicans have already been uttering, we don't know, but already the notion that there could be some principles or movement toward immigration reform has worried some conservatives within the House Republican Conference. So there could be some clouds gathering in Cambridge, where the retreat is being held, within the conference, and where exactly they want to go with immigration, if anywhere, really, this midterm election year.
And Billy House covering the House for us. His Twitter handle is House in Session. And your publication's website, nationaljournal.com. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
And just an update, House and Senate negotiators have announced they've reached a bipartisan agreement on a final farm bill. We could see them take it up as early as Wednesday. And here on the floor of the House, voting two bills tonight dealing with natural resources. This is the first of the two for the evening. Later this week, in the House, looking at banning federal funding for abortions and, again, possible work on that farm bill. And while we're in this 15-minute vote on the Good Samaritan Search and Recovery Act, we're going to take a look at some of today's White House briefing.
The talks in Geneva do not seem to be going particularly well, and now the Syrian regime says they won't even discuss Assad leaving, which has been non-negotiable for the U.S. So if the regime is not even willing to discuss Assad leaving, then what really is the purpose of the talks?
Well, first of all, the issue of President Assad not being a part of transitional governing authority is not one for the United States to decide. The reason why it's non-negotiable is not because the United States says that. It's because the people of Syria have said that, and the opposition has said that. And so the transitional governing authority has to be one that is reached in accordance and by mutual consent. And that's why Assad cannot be part of the future of Syria or part of this transitional authority. Now, I'm not in a position to judge or on a daily basis or give a play-by-play of the negotiations. The process, as you know, is being run by the Joint Special Representative Brahimi and the United Nations. And as you will have seen from his public comments over the past few days, Mr. Brahimi has been keeping the press apprised of developments each day. So he and his office are the places to go for those kinds of evaluations. What's important is that the two parties have sat in the same room over the past several days to discuss critical issues. And this process is ongoing. And I would expect quite a few ups and downs along the way. This was, as I said last week, and others, including the President, have made clear, always going to be difficult. But it is the only way to end the conflict in Syria. it has to be ended through a negotiated political settlement. So negotiations like this are by their nature long and complicated, but the aim is to find consensus, and that's what Mr. Brahimi is focusing on, and he certainly has our support in that effort.
Is there anything that you have seen on the ground in the talks so far that gives you any confidence that there is something that can be accomplished here?
Of course there's something that can be accomplished here. That is, eventually, to reach consensus. That's the purpose of the negotiations. The fact is, it took some time to get there, but the parties are meeting. And the Geneva Communiqué is the foundational document around which they're meeting. And we are realistic about how difficult this is going to be, but we are completely convinced that this is the only way forward for Syria, and that's through negotiations.
To talk about the State of the Union a little bit, the details that came that the White House discussed over the weekend indicated that the President is going to focus a lot on executive action that he can take himself if Congress does not want to cooperate on certain issues. But as you've acknowledged, there are limits to what the President can do without Congress. So does this State of the Union reflect a scaled-back agenda for the President for 2014?
I think restoring security and economic vitality to the middle class is a very ambitious goal. Restoring opportunity for all and expanding opportunity for all. Those are very ambitious goals. And those are the goals the President has identified. Those are the goals that the President will work all year toward achieving. And he will, in conducting that work, he will use every means available to him to move forward towards achievement of those goals. And that includes working with Congress and passing legislation and signing it where Congress will work with him. But he simply won't stop there because, mindful of Congress's reluctance to be cooperative at times, the President is going to exercise his authority. He's going to use his pen and his phone to advance an agenda that is focused squarely on expanding opportunity, making sure that in America hard work and responsibility are rewarded and that opportunity is expanded. So that's what he's going to do, and I don't think there's any way to describe that except as ambitious. And it would be the wrong thing to do for this President or any President to judge the progress we make as a nation in Washington, both in Washington and beyond, only by the number of bills we get passed through Congress. Because the opportunity for advancing the agenda that the President has through other means is broad and deep, and he'll explore it. Yep.
Thanks, Jay. On Egypt, apparently General al-Sisi is on the brink of announcing his candidacy for the presidency. I'm wondering what you make of this in light of his willingness to use force against opposition in Egypt and the process of Egyptian democracy that seems again to be leading to a military leader.
Well, let me take apart that question and say a couple of things. First of all, we recognize the important decision that Egyptians made regarding their constitution, and we now look to the Egyptian government to implement the rights protected and guaranteed under the new constitution. And while the Constitution affords some improved protections for human rights, we remain concerned about provisions within it allowing civilians to be tried in military courts. Checks and balances between the military, the civilian government, and the judiciary will also be important. The Egyptian government and the Egyptian people are navigating this transition process in a security environment that has been challenging and harmful for everyone. It is the responsibility of any government to exercise restraint and to do its utmost to safeguard human rights and civil liberties, even when confronted with violence. If Egypt's leaders want to ensure a political transition to democracy, that ultimately improves the stability and economic prospects of their country and is respected by the Egyptian people, they must unequivocally ensure an environment that is free of intimidation and retribution. Only the people of Egypt can take the next steps in their transition, whether it is determining that presidential elections will take place before parliamentary ones or that al-Sisi will be able to run. As they make these decisions for themselves, we will continue to urge them to do so in keeping with the spirit of their revolution and in line with the commitments the interim government has made. Any others?
On the Affordable Care Act.
Yes.
Several senators, Burr, Coburn, and Hatch, have apparently proposed not only repealing Obamacare, but replacing it with legislation that would provide their vision of health care. Can you comment on that?
Well, we haven't obviously seen a proposal. What I have seen in press reports suggests that this looks very much like just another repeal proposal, another attempt to raise taxes on the middle class, to keep uninsured Americans with pre-existing conditions locked out of the market, to raise costs on seniors, and to take away Medicaid from the millions of Americans who stand to gain coverage thanks to the expansion that was part of the Affordable Care Act. It also raises questions about what the impact could be on employer-sponsored coverage, which could potentially cause millions to lose the employer plans they have today. Now, we haven't seen further details, and yet we know, because we've seen it time and again, that Republican energy on this issue has been focused on repeal, focused on, again and again and again, an ideological pursuit that would result in depriving millions of Americans of what are core benefits. It would result in restoring in the health care and health insurance equation in America the primacy of insurance companies over individuals, giving back to insurance companies the power to deny an American coverage because he or she has a pre-existing condition, or to charge women twice what they charge men because they're women. We strongly believe that's the wrong course of action, and as I said over the weekend, embracing repeal as a legislative or political strategy will not be successful, in my view, for the Republicans.
Finally, can you comment, Republicans are meeting this week to sort of map out their strategy for the coming year. With regard to the debt limit, raising the debt limit, there is reporting that they may seek to attach provisions that would make changes to the Affordable Care Act as part of their conditions for increasing the debt limit. You've been pretty unequivocal in your position on that, but can you comment on those efforts?
On the efforts you just described?
Yeah.
Well, our view is, and our position is, what it has always been. The American people cannot, and the President will not on their behalf, pay a ransom, an ideological ransom, just so that Congress will do its job and pay the bills that Congress has racked up. It's just irresponsible. It would be, again, to inflict serious damage on the economy and the middle class at a time when the economy is poised to grow further and to create even more jobs. So, you know, we're not going to pay a ransom when it comes to ensuring that the United States doesn't default for the first time in its history. We saw this movie before, and a lot of Republicans, including senior Republican leaders on Capitol Hill, said after the shutdown and after that disastrous ideological effort that they would not go down that road again. So we certainly hope that that's the case. Let me move around. Laura.
There are a lot of reactions and statements about the safety during the Olympic Games. What's the White House reaction to that?
Well, Laura, as we discussed last week, we are in regular conversation with Russian authorities about security issues surrounding the Olympic Games. We will provide, as we have in the past, and with the cooperation of Russian authorities, diplomatic security agents and FBI agents who will assist Americans and the security of Americans in Sochi. And I think it's important to note that while there is and has been an uptick in threat reporting around the games, that is both a concern, but it is also something you would expect. In an international event of this nature, with this much attention, in the world that we live in today, are frequently circumstances where we see increased threats and increased threat reporting. So Lisa Monaco, the President's Counterterrorism Advisor and Homeland Security Advisor, is leading a working group that on this issue, and we will continue to apprise the American people and those Americans who are traveling to Sochi of any information that we may have in order to assist them. The State Department has issued a travel alert, which is not to say that Americans shouldn't go, not at all, but to say, to advise Americans of the precautions they should take if they are going to Sochi, and to ensure that they're registered, or to recommend that they register with the State Department so they can receive information quickly should it be put out for their purposes. So this is something we're going to constantly focus on in the coming days and weeks, and we will provide the American people with additional information as we get it.
And I have a second question. Do you have any reaction to the news that the French president is single due to the fact he's coming for a state visit? Was it a problem for the White House in terms of organization?
The answer is no. To the second question, or second part of the question, the President and everyone here looks very much forward to the visit of the French President for a state dinner and state visit, and that remains the case. Ann.
Thank you, Jay. On the Olympics, has Russia accepted any of the help that President Obama has offered? And does the President have any concerns, the U.S. have any concerns that the situation in Ukraine might be so unsettled that Russia might try to take some action there to avoid any spillover or problems during the Olympics?
On the first part, we are in regular conversations with Russian authorities. We are always seeking more information, and we have offered any help that the Russians might need. We strongly believe that Russia believes it is in Russia's interest to take every measure to ensure a safe and secure Olympic Games. I think that's self-evident, and we are obviously in a situation, not as the host country, but as a visiting participant, not in security lead, but we are able to do what we can to take precautions. Department of Defense has talked about some of those precautions. I don't have a readout of conversations in terms of what we have offered and what the Russian response has been, but we are simply always eager to get as much information as we can in a situation like this, and working with the Russians in that regard, and of course making clear to them that we're ready to provide whatever assistance we can to help make the Games as secure as possible.
Will the President talk about the Games at all during the State of the Union address? Can you give us any sense of whether this dress will look like past ones in terms of length and structure?
I have no further details to provide on the State of the Union address. I very much want it to be exciting and surprising when you hear it tomorrow night. I think that it's fair to say an address like this covers a lot of territory, as it always has in the past. So I wouldn't be surprised if that were the case tomorrow night. The President is continuing to work on the speech with his team, led by Director of Speechwriting Cody Keenan, and he very much looks forward to the opportunity to deliver the address tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard. Yes, Jim.
Getting back to the executive actions the President will be talking about tomorrow night, if this is the right course of action for the coming year, why hasn't he not taken it already?
Well, Jim, 2 points. One, the President has embraced the idea in the past that he can use his authority as President and the powers available to the President to advance his agenda on behalf of the American people. What we have said is that he views 2014 as a year of action, and that he has tasked his team to come up with new ways in which he can advance that agenda, and that includes legislative proposals and advances, as well as ways that we can move the country forward and expand opportunity and reward hard work through either executive action, signing executive orders, or through using the bully pulpit, or the modern bully pulpit, the phone, by bringing people together around an issue so that it gets the focus that a White House event or endorsement can give it. And you saw that recently when we had college presidents from across the country here. And that was very much, I think, an example of what the White House can do in advancing this, in advancing an agenda, not necessarily through Congress. You've seen it with the promise zones and the manufacturing.
On this vote, the yeas are 394, the nays are 0, 2/3 being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentlewoman from Wyoming, Ms. Loomis, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3008 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 213, H.R. 3008, a bill to provide for the conveyance of a small parcel of National Forest System land in the Los Padres National Forest in California and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
And just finishing up with the Good Samaritan Search and Recovery Act, that passed. That was the first of 2 votes tonight. This is the second one, and it is to provide for the conveyance of a small parcel of National Forest System land in Los Padres National Forest in California. And that would be going to something called the White Lotus Foundation. It's a yoga training center. And again, this is a 5-minute vote here, H.R. 3008.
are 367. The nays are 27, two-thirds being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The chair lays before the House the following personal requests.
Leaves of absence requested for Mr. Farr of California for today, Mr. Honda of California for today, Mr. Jones of North Carolina for today and the balance of the week, and Mr. Tipton of Colorado for today and the balance of the week.
Without objection, the requests are granted.
The chair will entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. The House is not in order. The gentlelady from Florida is recognized.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor and commend Jean Prescott, a dear friend and a pillar within our South Florida community. Jean received the 2014 Hotelier Hall of Fame Award from the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association for his success in managing a network of hotels that provide exquisite accommodations and excellent service. Mr. Prescott's dedication to excellence is best reflected in his leadership role of a 10-year, $40 million renovation of the Biltmore Hotel, an iconic and historic Coral Gables landmark located in the heart of my congressional district, as all good things are. Thank you, Jean, for helping to make South Florida an even more welcoming destination for tourists who keep our economy strong, and congratulations on this well-deserved honor. You make us proud, amigo. Congratulations to Jean Prescott. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition? The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. One of my constituents, Memphian Command Master Chief Evelyn Bond Banks, will retire on Saturday from the Navy with the honor of being the senior most enlisted female in the United States Navy. Her tours have ranged from the Navy Recruiting District Office in Memphis to a 10-month deployment on the USS Abraham Lincoln in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. She most recently served as Command Master Chief at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis and has inspired countless young midship women throughout her career by demonstrating that women can succeed and be influential in the Navy. Command Master Chief Banks was at the Navy Yard in Washington on September 15, the day of the tragic shooting. She knew many, if not all, the victims personally and attended the funeral of each of the 11 victims and the shooter. Command Master Chief Banks has worn black for 120 consecutive days to mourn the lives of each, 10 days for each, and 10 for the shooter as well. I appreciate the service of Command Master Chief Banks, wish her the best in her well-deserved retirement from the Navy, thank her for her service to our country, and welcome her back to Memphis, Tennessee. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Address the House for 1 minute, revising some of my remarks, and the House is not in order.
Members, please clear the floor with their conversations. The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to congratulate two Wayzata High School National Bowl teams for winning first and second place at the 2014 regional competition. Now, these teams of dedicated students competed against dozens of neighboring high school schools for a chance to represent Minnesota at the Department of Energy's National Science Bowl. More than 225,000 students, Mr. Speaker, participated in the National Science Bowl since it first was established in 1991. The top 16 high schools teams in the national finals will win $1,000 for their school science departments. The winning team of Amanda, Joseph, Giant, William, Orion, and Nathan will now head to Washington, D.C. in April to compete against other high school teams from across the country in the fields of biology, chemistry, physics, and math. I want to congratulate all the teams in Minnesota and encourage everyone to keep up the great work studying science and math. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I deny this consent to address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise tonight to recognize Adelpha Callejo, a legendary Latina civil rights leader in Texas who died Friday at the age of 90. A Dallas lawyer and civil rights leader who was first exposed to activism as a girl interpreting for her father, Adelpha made a significant impact during her life. Ms. Callejo became the first Latina to graduate from SMU School of Law and practiced in Dallas for more than 40 years, mentoring many Latino and Latino lawyers along the way. Adelpha Callejo, La Madrina, or Godmother as many called her, is well known for her civil rights work to eliminate racial barriers, stop immigrant abuse, and improve education in the state of Texas. During her dedication of an elementary school named after her in Dallas last year, Ms. Adelpha told the audience, "Only through education will we make the world a better place than we found it." May her commitment to improving education and her legacy of working on behalf of a better Texas continue through her family and all those lives she has touched throughout the decade. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the tragedy of human sex trafficking cannot be fully realized until one sees the pain of hopelessness in the victim's eyes. On a recent trip to Honduras, I visited two shelters for sex trafficked victims, La Elizondo and the El Refugio shelters. Some of these victims were as young as 12 years of age. They had been raped, drugged, abused, and exploited. These shelters are helping them to regain their lives, their dignity, and, yes, hope. But don't be fooled into thinking that this vile crime of sex trafficking only happens somewhere else. It happens in the United States as well. The average age of girls trafficked in the United States is between 12 and 14 years of age. And like Honduras, our country lacks shelters for these girls. There are about 5,000 shelters for animals throughout the country, according to the SPCA. But there are only 226 beds available for domestic minor sex trafficking victims, according to Shared Hope. This has got to change, Mr. Speaker. It's time for us to rescue the child victims of sex slavery and then put the traffickers and the child abusers in the jailhouse where they belong. And that's just the way it is.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York, Mr. Tonko, seek recognition?
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise this evening to recognize and congratulate the Albany Symphony Orchestra and conductor David Allen Miller for winning a coveted Grammy Award last night for Best Classical Instrumental Solo. It's the first accomplishment of its kind for this orchestra. The composition, Conjurer, was recorded at the Troy Savings Bank Music Hall, also in New York's 20th Congressional District, and gave our area yet another reason to be proud of the Capital Region arts and cultural scene. For 84 years, the Albany Symphony Orchestra has been giving a voice to beautifully written pieces of music and enriching our lives in the Capital Region. I again congratulate David Allen Miller and the Albany Symphony Orchestra for their accomplishments and their victory last night at the 56th Annual Grammy Awards. With that, I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the lady from Texas, gentlelady from Texas, seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Speaker. In a few minutes, I will join my colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus to discuss a very important topic that has long been one of our crucial issues, proliferating now across America and around the world, income inequality. But I wanted to rise as I understand the Farm Bill is now prepared to go to the Rules Committee and now will be on the floor of the House this week. An Associated Press article of the new age or the new face of food stamps, working age Americans. Now in 2013, 2014, 50% of those receiving food stamps are working Americans, such as a young lady pictured here, 25 years old, with a 3-year-old son who, yes, was in the United States Army. When are we going to realize that even though the economy is churning, the jobs being created are low-wage jobs, the working and middle class need our help? It's not a handout. It is not a way to be able to close the deficit and the debt, which is closing, by breaking the backs of hardworking Americans. What a shame that a farm bill would come forward as it has never come forward before, and it takes away a lifeline for hardworking Americans. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute and revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've seen reports that the President is going to come to this chamber tomorrow and talk about avoiding dealing with Congress. He's going to pick up his pen and sign executive orders without coming to this institution and following our Constitution. Well, Mr. President, if you're that willing to pick up your pen, then pick it up and sign the Keystone Pipeline permit so that we can start creating jobs in this country and get 40,000 people off the unemployment rolls and into good-paying jobs that are careers. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
To address this body for 1 minute and to revise and extend.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a member of the Safe Climate Caucus, I urge my Republican colleagues to lift their heads from the sand so that they can see the effects of climate change throughout our country. Scientists agree that climate change is causing the extreme weather that is devastating our citizens and our economy. The Republican response has been to deny the science. Year after year, Republicans in Congress not only refuse to do something about climate change, they insist on policies that actually make things worse. Because Republicans are determined to ignore the threats posed by climate change, the President has no choice but to use executive authority to protect the American people. I look forward to hearing the President's proposals tomorrow at the State of the Union address. Hopefully the Congress can begin to show some leadership on this issue before it's too late. And I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
I seek unanimous consent to address the body for 1 minute and extend and revise my remarks.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, at manufacturing plants in the district I represent, employers are having a hard time finding the skilled workers they need, and many other employers can't find low-skilled workers to fill openings. At colleges across the country, gifted students face the reality that after graduation, they'll have to leave this country to achieve their dreams elsewhere. These are but some of the faces of immigration reform. Their stories underscore the urgent need to fix our broken system. At an immigration roundtable I hosted last year, a dreamer, Estefania Garcia, told her story and didn't leave a dry eye in the room. I invited Estefania as my guest to the State of the Union tomorrow night to personify the need for comprehensive reform. Estefania's story is moving, but it is in no way unique. With comprehensive immigration reform, the world's most gifted STEM minds will help us achieve 21st century success. Our economy will be injected with the talent and skills it needs to thrive. 11 million people will pay taxes and become fully engaged in our democracy for the first time. I rise in strong support of comprehensive immigration reform, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purposes does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I seek permission to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to talk about the 23rd District in 1 minute, 23 in 1 today. I want to talk about Monahans, Texas, the home of the Lobos. They're known, Monahans High School is known not only for their athletic programs with several state championships in women's volleyball, for example, but also as on the academic side as the host of one of the biggest speech and debate tournaments in West Texas. Monahans is in Ward County in the Permian Basin, located off of I-20. The economy is booming. High-paying jobs, an active full-service Chamber of Commerce, one of the more active in the region. And if you're looking for recreation, the Monahans Sandhill State Park has sand dunes 70 feet high, sandboarding, sand football, sand surfing, sand tobogganing, hiking, and even horseback riding. Now, if you go there in the spring, for example, the Rattlesnake Army Air Base will be a new museum. It's one of the largest bomber training bases of World War II and was a temporary home of the Enola Gay that dropped the atomic bomb in Japan in World War II. It's scheduled to open in March. The 23rd District, 24% of Texas nearly is in one district. It's an incredible stretch. And I'm so proud to have the opportunity to represent Monahans, Texas, and Ward County. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2013, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Jeffries, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent that all members be given 5 days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, it's an honor and a privilege to once again have this opportunity to come to the floor of the House of Representatives and to anchor, along with my good friend and colleague, the distinguished gentleman from Nevada, Representative Stephen Horsford, the Congressional Black Caucus Special Order, where for the next 60 minutes we have an opportunity to speak directly to the American people about an issue of great significance for the communities that we represent as well as the entire country. Income inequality is an issue that is of increasing concern to working families, low-income Americans, middle-class folks, those who aspire to be part of the middle class. We know that at this moment in time, in 2014, income inequality is the worst that it's been in America since the Great Depression. Now, we live in the wealthiest country in the world, yet we know that all across America there are people who are struggling to put food on the table, clothing on their back, or provide shelter for their families. That's an unacceptable situation. And we know that things have gotten worse over the last 5 years since the collapse of the economy. And the recovery, while progress has been made, has been uneven, inconsistent, and schizophrenic in many ways. Some have benefited, particularly those amongst the wealthiest, 5 to 10% of Americans, but others have fallen behind. And so today the Congressional Black Caucus will speak to the issue of income inequality, but also propose why it is it's something that needs to be addressed and what are some of the things that Congress can do in working with the President to deal with this pressing issue in America. We've been joined by several distinguished members of the Congressional Black Caucus, and it's now my honor and privilege to yield some time to the Dean of New York's congressional delegation, a legendary member of the House of Representatives, the Lion of Lenox Avenue, and the distinguished gentleman from New York, Representative Charles B. Rangel.
Unanimous consent to revise and extend.
Without objection.
Let me thank my friend and my colleague from New York for bringing this important issue to the attention of our Congress and the nation. It's a strange thing about those Americans that have been raised in poor communities, and that is that as they grow older, it seems that God has blessed them to remember just the good things that they've enjoyed, and the misery and the pain somehow fades away. But I think that the most important thing that comes out of this is the hope for the future. Very few Americans have not witnessed in their families devastating economic impacts, but that was more than compensated for because they knew if they had to be in any country in the world that some of these problems could be resolved through opportunity, it would be the United States of America. The tragic thing that we have today is that this dream appears to be fading for the poor as well as the middle class. And when that happens, I think what makes America different from so many other countries is that it is possible to have classes that are locked in frigid concrete, as it used to be the case in Europe, that is dramatically changing to be more fluid as it relates to upward mobility, while it appears to us that today, if you were born in poverty, you are almost destined to remain in poverty. What a sinful, historic condition that would make. What a tragic example it would set for the rest of the world that have used us as an example as to what human beings can do. And what is it that the economists don't see? Because poverty is not only painful, but it destroys the very fiber of our economic productivity. Sick people, poor people are not productive people. There's inclinations for them to cost more in terms of dollars and cents than if we provided them with the tools for them to acquire decent jobs with decent living wages. People are talking about equality in wages, and I'm not comfortable with that expression because I don't want some of my friends on the other side of the aisle thinking that I think everyone should have the same income in terms of equality. But when it comes to equality of opportunity, when it comes to making certain that you can tell your kids that you're doing pretty good, but you know that they can do better, when it comes to those dreams being hurt because of the examples that we find in this country, then the whole idea of manufacturers wanting to have their workers be in a position to buy the things that they are manufacturing or the services they are provided. And so I am so glad that we have this time tonight to go beyond the pain of poverty and talk about the hopes and the dreams that people have in coming to this country. They come here not to remain poor. They don't come here to get rich. They come here because of the opportunity we have. And poverty is a poison that can get into any economy and make it impossible for poor folks to get out of it. So thank you so much for constantly reminding this great country that we can't afford to lose that greatness, because a lot of it was in God we trust. And I do hope, as a result of our voices, that we hear from some of the people that hear directly from God, our ministers and our rabbis, to be able to understand that Jesus may have said that the meek shall inherit the earth, but he sure didn't mean that the meek should suffer while the rich just get richer. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I yield back the balance of my time.
Well, I certainly thank the distinguished gentleman from New York for his always eloquent observations, and it's my honor and my privilege. We've been joined by the representative from Texas who's been a fighter on behalf of these issues, a voice for the voiceless, someone who is always on the front lines trying to deal with socioeconomic inequality wherever it might be found in America, but certainly in her home district anchored in Houston, Texas. Let me now yield to Representative Sheila Jackson Lee.
I thank the distinguished co-leader of the task force of presenting our case to the American people, distinguished gentleman, and I say it with great affection and respect, of New York,